This is a moment of crisis in our country. There's no doubt that there has been a loss of faith in many institutions in this country. Specifically, we're here to talk about our court system, our justice system. There is no doubt that there has been a decline in trust and confidence in our court system. The National Center for State Courts does a survey every year, and they ask questions about generally different institutions, whether it's the federal courts or the federal government or the legislature or the state courts. How do people feel about it? And the good news is that in the most recent survey from just last year, that survey showed that the entity, the institution that has the highest level of trust of confidence are the state courts. At 62% of the people said that. Now think about that. If you're in school and you get a 62% on your test, that's a D-. We have to understand this is a moment of crisis when people start to lose faith. We also know there's been a great deal of study and work asking people questions about why do you obey laws? Why do you obey court orders? And the answer to these studies have been done for over 30 years always comes back with the same answer. People are willing to accept what happens to them in a court, win or lose, if they believe they've been treated fairly. So what does that mean if people are questioning that? It's frightening. It's a challenge to our ideas about the rule of law. So what can we do about it is your question. The National Center for State Courts actually just did a study in the last 6 months where they did focus groups all around the country and asked people what they thought about the courts and got the answers that I'm describing. But then they asked questions about what would this change your mind about the courts if you learn certain things. So I think that's kind of important to think about. One of the things is that most people do not understand what state courts do. It's just, they read about the United States Supreme Court, they see it as kind of abstract. But the fact is the state courts are courts for real people with real problems. What state courts do is protect vulnerable people, abused children, disabled adults, people whose families are breaking up, people in mental health crisis, people who their lives and their families are shattered because of crime. That's where the courts actually interact in people's lives. I think when people understand that, they could see it, the work in a different way. Another important piece about how we explain what the courts do is also the results we hear that people don't trust our courts because they see it as a two-tiered system for the wealthy and for everybody else. And we know that actually in our court system right now, in over 70% of the civil cases, at least one side is not represented by a lawyer, probably can't afford a lawyer. So I think a really important part of restoring faith and confidence in our court is our access to justice emphasis. Looking at our courts. Our courts, we always think of them as adversarial places with two lawyers arguing up and back. That's not what our courts look like anymore. So how do we make courts function for the people who need our services? One of the things we learned in the pandemic was court is not a place, it's a service. How do we serve people where they are, specifically if they don't have lawyers? Those are just some of the ideas I think that are important for how judges and the court system and lawyers can work together to try to meet this moment of crisis of trust and confidence.